What is Origins of Self-Determination Theory? Hi, I hope you are doing well. Today, as usual, you will join Your Motivation University with the usual intimacy. Today we are talking about Origins of Self-Determination Theory. We hope to reveal many very important and wonderful facts about Origins of Self-Determination Theory in this video. We invite you to stay with Your Motivation University until the last few seconds of this special video. Self-determination theory, SDT, stands today as one of psychology's most influential frameworks for understanding human motivation, behavior, and well-being. Developed through the collaborative efforts of Edward Deci and Richard Ryan beginning in the late 1970s, this theory has fundamentally transformed our understanding of what drives human behavior across various domains. Before SDT emerged, behaviorist approaches dominated psychological understanding of motivation, emphasizing external rewards and punishments as primary behavioral drivers. SDT represented a significant paradigm shift by proposing that humans possess innate psychological needs and intrinsic motivational tendencies that, when supported, lead to optimal functioning and personal growth. This comprehensive examination traces the intellectual origins, foundational research, key collaborations, and evolutionary development of self-determination theory over 4 decades of scientific inquiry. The seeds of self-determination theory were planted in the early 1970s through Edward Deci's groundbreaking research on intrinsic motivation. Deci, who received his PhD from Carnegie Mellon University in 1970, was initially interested in understanding what happens to people's natural interest and enjoyment in activities when external rewards are introduced. This curiosity led to his pivotal 1971 study that would fundamentally challenge prevailing motivational theories of the time. In this experimental investigation, Deci tasked 2 groups of psychology students with solving Soma Cube puzzles across 3 different sessions, ostensibly as part of a research project on problem solving. The experimental design was elegant in its simplicity, yet profound in its implications. In the first session, neither group received compensation for solving the puzzles. During the second session, one group was paid for each successfully completed puzzle, while the control group remained unpaid. The most revealing findings emerged in the third session, when both groups returned to the unpaid condition. When Deci announced that the time was up and left participants alone in the room for a period, those who had previously received monetary rewards showed significantly less interest in continuing with the puzzles, often turning to available magazines instead. In contrast, participants who had never been paid were more likely to continue working on the puzzles voluntarily. This observation led Deci to a counterintuitive conclusion that directly challenged the dominant behaviorist paradigm. External rewards could actually undermine intrinsic motivation rather than enhance it. This phenomenon, later termed the undermining effect, became a cornerstone in the development of SDT and sparked a new direction in motivation research. Instead of focusing merely on how to increase the quantity of motivation through reinforcement, Deci's findings suggested that the quality of motivation mattered significantly for sustained engagement and interest. The intellectual foundations of self-determination theory did not emerge in isolation, but were influenced by various psychological traditions that preceded it. While SDT diverged significantly from strict behaviorism, B.F. Skinner's ideas on reinforcement and conditioning played an important role in shaping Deci's early work. Specifically, Skinner's theories prompted Deci to explore the limitations of external rewards in sustaining behavior and to investigate the role of autonomy in fostering genuine engagement. This represents an interesting case of a new theory, developing partly in opposition to established frameworks, as Deci began to question whether the behaviorist emphasis on external contingencies was sufficient to explain the complexity of human motivation. Another significant influence on the development of SDT came from the humanistic psychological tradition, particularly the work of Carl Rogers. Rogers' emphasis on self-actualization and the importance of a positive, growth-oriented environment resonated with Deci's emerging perspective on intrinsic motivation and autonomy. Rogers' client-centered approach, which emphasized creating conditions where individuals could discover their own solutions and growth paths, aligned with what would become central tenets of SDT, that humans naturally strive for growth and that social environments can either support or thwart this natural tendency. The humanistic influence helped shape SDT's fundamentally positive view of human nature and its emphasis on the social conditions that foster optimal human functioning. Unlike theories that viewed humans as primarily responsive to external forces or driven by unconscious impulses, SDT adopted a more agentic view, seeing individuals as naturally inclined toward growth, integration, and self-regulation when their basic psychological needs are supported. This optimistic perspective on human potential became a distinguishing feature of the theory, informing both its conceptual framework and its practical applications.
The history of self-determination theory took a decisive turn in 1977 when Edward Deci met Richard Ryan at the University of Rochester. Despite their different academic backgrounds, Deci with experimental psychology and mathematics, and Ryan with philosophy and clinical psychology, they discovered a shared interest in human motivation and autonomy. Ryan, who would receive his PhD from the University of Rochester in 1981, was particularly interested in how people handle change and what facilitates or impedes personal growth. As Deci later recalled about their first meeting, "We hit it off right away, marking the beginning of one of the most productive and influential collaborations in contemporary psychology. What made their partnership particularly fruitful was their complementary perspectives. Deci's experimental approach and Ryan's clinical and philosophical insights combined to create a theory that was both empirically rigorous and conceptually rich. Their early conversations revealed common interests despite different intellectual approaches. Where we came together was in this common interest in autonomy and human motivation and wellness," Ryan noted. This complementarity allowed them to address complex questions about human motivation from multiple angles, strengthening both the theoretical foundations and empirical validation of their emerging framework. Their collaboration would span more than 4 decades and produce numerous influential publications that would shape the landscape of motivation research. The longevity and productivity of their partnership speak to both the compatibility of their intellectual approaches and the generative power of the theoretical framework they developed. Their work together at the University of Rochester created an intellectual hub for motivation research that attracted students and collaborators from around the world, further extending the reach and impact of their ideas. In the early years of their collaboration, Deci and Ryan began to articulate the core psychological needs that would become central to self-determination theory. Through their research, they identified 3 fundamental needs that they proposed were universal across cultures and essential for psychological well-being: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. These needs were not arbitrarily selected, but emerged from consistent patterns observed in their research on conditions that led to optimal functioning and well-being. The need for autonomy refers to the experience of volition and self-endorsement of one's actions. The sense that one's behavior emanates from and is endorsed by the self rather than being controlled by external or internal pressures. Competence involves feeling effective in one's interactions with the social environment and experiencing opportunities to exercise and express one's capacities. Relatedness encompasses a feeling of being connected to others, caring for and being cared for by others, and having a sense of belonging to a social group or community. The identification of these 3 needs provided a foundation for understanding why certain contexts enhance intrinsic motivation, while others diminish it. This framework also offered an explanation for the undermining effect of external rewards. They can be perceived as controlling, thereby thwarting the need for autonomy. By focusing on these basic psychological needs, Deci and Ryan created a theoretical framework that could explain not only what motivates behavior, but also what conditions promote versus hinder optimal functioning and well-being. The formalization of self-determination theory came with the publication of Deci and Ryan's seminal book, Self-Determination: An Intrinsic Motivation in Human Behavior, in 1985. This comprehensive work outlined the theoretical foundations of SDT and presented the empirical evidence supporting its key propositions. The publication of this book marked a significant milestone in the development of the theory, providing a coherent framework that integrated various strands of research on intrinsic motivation, internalization, and psychological needs. In this foundational text, Deci and Ryan articulated their definition of self-determination as the inherent human tendency and inclination to move toward growth and fulfillment, with competence, connection, and autonomy being the pathways to achieve this growth. They established two central assumptions of the theory. First, that the need for growth drives behavior, and second, that autonomous motivation is important. They distinguish between extrinsic motivation, driven by external forces, and intrinsic motivation, engagement in an activity for its own sake, arguing that the latter was more conducive to well-being and sustained engagement. The book challenged the dominant behavioral approaches to motivation by emphasizing the importance of autonomy and internal regulation rather than external contingencies. It also articulated how social context can either support or undermine the satisfaction of basic psychological needs, thereby affecting motivation, performance, and well-being. This publication established SDT as a significant theoretical perspective in psychology and set the stage for its expansion in subsequent decades.
As their research progressed, Deci and Ryan expanded self-determination theory beyond its initial focus on the simple dichotomy between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. They recognized that motivation is not a unitary concept, but exists along a continuum from a motivation, which is a lack of intention to act, through various forms of extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. This led to the development of the organismic integration theory, one of the many theories within the broader self-determination theory framework. Organismic integration theory describes different forms of extrinsic motivation and the contextual factors that either promote or hinder internalization and integration of the regulation for these behaviors. The theory identified 4 types of extrinsic motivation that vary in their degree of autonomy. External regulation, which is behavior controlled by external rewards or punishments. Introjection, which is behavior motivated by internal pressures and contingent self-esteem. Identification, which is behavior motivated by personally valued goals. And integration, which is behavior fully assimilated into one's sense of self. This more nuanced understanding of motivation acknowledged that even when behaviors are not intrinsically motivated, they can still be autonomously regulated if the individual has internalized the value of the activity. This expansion of the theory addressed real-world situations where intrinsic motivation alone could not explain the full range of human behavior, particularly in domains that are not inherently interesting or enjoyable but are nevertheless important for functioning in society. The 1980s and early 1990s saw a period of significant expansion and refinement of self-determination theory. During this time, Deci and Ryan, along with a growing number of collaborators, conducted extensive research to test and validate the theory across different domains and populations. They developed measurement tools to assess different types of motivation and the degree to which psychological needs were satisfied in various contexts. The theory was applied to educational settings, examining how teaching styles that support autonomy versus control affect students' motivation and learning outcomes. A meta-analysis conducted across 144 studies with more than 79,000 students found strong support for self-determination theory's predictions, showing that teacher autonomy support predicts students' needs satisfaction and self-determined motivation more strongly than parental autonomy support. This research also found that among the 3 basic psychological needs, competence was the strongest positive predictor of self-determined motivation, followed by autonomy and then relatedness. Self-determination theory was also extended to health behaviors, sports and exercise, work environments, and close relationships. This extensive body of research demonstrated the robustness of self-determination theory's fundamental principles across diverse domains and contributed to its growing influence in both theoretical understanding and practical applications. The theory's ability to explain motivation and well-being across such varied contexts spoke to its explanatory power and practical utility. One of the distinctive aspects of self-determination theory's development was its evolution into a meta-theory comprising several mini-theories, each addressing different aspects of motivation and psychological functioning. As Deci and Ryan's research program expanded, they organized their findings into a coherent framework with 6 mini-theories that together provide a comprehensive account of human motivation. The first mini-theory, cognitive evaluation theory, focuses on how social contexts affect intrinsic motivation, particularly through their impact on perceived autonomy and competence. Organismic integration theory, the second mini-theory, addresses the internalization of extrinsic motivation and the conditions that promote versus hinder this process. Causality orientations theory, the third mini-theory, describes individual differences in how people orient toward different aspects of the environment in regulating behavior. Basic psychological needs theory, the fourth mini-theory, elaborates on the concept of evolved psychological needs and their relations to psychological health and well-being. Goal contents theory, the fifth mini-theory, distinguishes between intrinsic and extrinsic goals and their impact on motivation and wellness. Finally, relationships motivation theory, the sixth mini-theory, examines how relationships satisfy the need for relatedness and potentially support or thwart the other basic needs. This meta-theoretical structure allowed for a comprehensive account of motivation, while maintaining specificity and precision in addressing different aspects of human behavior and development. The framework has proven to be flexible and generative, accommodating new findings and extending to new domains while maintaining conceptual coherence. A significant aspect of the development of self-determination theory has been the examination of its cross-cultural applicability. Critics initially questioned whether the emphasis on autonomy in SDT reflected Western individualistic values that might not be relevant in more collectivistic societies. Deci and Ryan responded to these critiques through further research and theoretical refinements, distinguishing between autonomy, self-endorsement, and independence, not relying on others. They argued that autonomy as defined in SDT, the experience of volition and self-endorsement, is a universal need, even in cultures that value interdependence and adherence to group norms. This distinction clarified that autonomy in SDT is not equivalent to individualism or independence, but rather refers to the experience of acting with a sense of choice and volition, even when choosing to follow cultural norms or fulfilling obligations to others. Cross-cultural research has largely supported this position, showing that the satisfaction of the 3 basic psychological needs predicts well-being across diverse cultural contexts. Studies conducted in countries with collectivistic traditions, such as South Korea, Japan, and China, have found that autonomy support predicts well-being and optimal functioning, just as it does in more individualistic Western contexts. These findings have strengthened the universality claim of SDT, while also promoting a more sophisticated understanding of how autonomy is expressed and supported in different cultural contexts. Another dimension of self-determination. Theory's broad applicability is its relevance across the entire lifespan. The theory has been applied to understand motivation in early childhood education, elementary and secondary schooling, higher education, work settings, retirement, and elder care. This developmental breadth has shown that the basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness remain important throughout life, though how they are expressed and satisfied may change with developmental stages and life circumstances. In early childhood, for example, SDT research has examined how parenting styles that support versus thwart basic needs affect children's development of intrinsic motivation and internalization. In adolescence, the theory has been applied to understand the challenges and opportunities for identity formation and the development of autonomous self-regulation. In adulthood, SDT has informed research on work motivation, relationship satisfaction, and healthy aging. This lifespan perspective has enriched the theory by showing how motivational processes evolve over time while maintaining the centrality of basic psychological needs for optimal functioning at every stage of life. The legacy of Deci and Ryan's work extends far beyond academic psychology, influencing practices in education, healthcare, parenting, management, and other domains. In education, SDT has informed teaching approaches that support students' autonomy and competence, leading to more engaged learning and better academic outcomes. Meta-analytic findings have confirmed that autonomous motivation predicts academic well-being, persistence, and achievement, with competence emerging as the strongest predictor among the three needs. In healthcare, the theory has guided interventions for behavior change, showing that autonomy-supportive approaches are more effective for long-term adherence to health recommendations than controlling strategies. In organizations, SDT principles have been applied to leadership and management practices, demonstrating that supporting employees' autonomy, competence, and relatedness leads to greater job satisfaction, performance, and well-being. The theory has also influenced approaches to parenting, psychotherapy, environmental sustainability, and digital media design. This practical impact reflects the robustness and relevance of the theory for addressing real-world challenges related to motivation and well-being. The translation of SDT principles into concrete practices and interventions represents one of the most significant contributions of the theory to human welfare. The continuing evolution of self-determination theory has been marked by its adaptability to emerging research questions and societal changes. Recent developments include the application of SDT to understand motivation in digital environments such as video games, social media, and online learning. The theory has also been integrated with other psychological frameworks such as mindfulness, positive psychology, and attachment theory, leading to new insights and applications. Neuroscientific research has begun to explore the biological basis of intrinsic motivation and need satisfaction, adding another dimension to the understanding of these processes. Additionally, SDT researchers have increasingly focused on how socioeconomic and political factors affect the satisfaction of basic psychological needs, addressing issues of inequality and social justice. These ongoing developments demonstrate the vitality and relevance of SDT as a framework for understanding human motivation in contemporary contexts. The journey of self-determination theory, from its origins in Deci's early experiments to its current status as a leading theoretical framework in psychology, reflects both the power of collaborative scientific inquiry and the enduring relevance of understanding human motivation. Deci and Ryan's extremely productive collaboration, spanning more than 4 decades, has resulted in a theory that has fundamentally changed how we understand what drives human behavior and what conditions lead to optimal functioning and well-being. Their work has shown that humans are not merely responsive to external contingencies, but are active organisms with innate tendencies toward growth, integration, and self-regulation. By identifying the basic psychological needs that underlie these tendencies and the social conditions that support or thwart them, SDT has provided a framework that is both theoretically rich and practically applicable. As the theory continues to evolve and expand, it remains grounded in its original insights about the importance of autonomy, competence, and relatedness for human flourishing. Self-determination theory stands as one of the most comprehensive, empirically supported, and practically relevant theories of human motivation in contemporary psychology. Its development illustrates how rigorous research, theoretical innovation, and sustained collaboration can produce insights that not only advance scientific understanding, but also enhance human welfare across diverse domains and cultural contexts. The ongoing evolution of SDT promises to continue illuminating the conditions that foster optimal motivation and well-being in an increasingly complex and changing world. If you haven't watched the mirror work techniques video on the card on the right, I invite you to watch it too. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please subscribe. If you like the video, please give it a like. Don't forget to share this video with others. We'll see you again tomorrow with a video like this. Until then, stay tuned with your Motivation University. Have a nice day. Bye.